trying to do
He's
it.
thinking hard.
Yeah.
Someone's idea.
Oh, okay.
If you want one, yeah, you can.
Okay.
As far as I know.
Yeah, that's gonna be a while. Maybe next year.
Sorry, my card. Not at all, no, sure, no. Okay, shall we go? That's a smile anyway. Okay, shall we go? Okay, 7:00, call the order. Roll call.
Beckwith.
Here.
Colwell. Deal.
Here.
Bartofisi.
Here.
Katsinas. Absent. Keeney. Here. Sheldon.
Here.
Okay, pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Warren Newport Public Library District provides the community with access to information, handles the imagination of children and adults, and supports lifelong learning. Okay, Steve, any instruction?
So, just a brief reminder, right down this aisle, to your left is the vending machines, and then to your right is the washrooms, and after that is the exit sign. Just in case there's an emergency and the paramedics are called, please leave a single aisle so they can operate. Thank you, have a good meeting.
I'd like to make a motion. I move to move item 13, new business A, presentation of audited financial statement for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2015, to this time in the agenda.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstained? George is. Okay. You're up.
Okay, so I don't know how you want me to do this. I usually go through the financial statements, and, yeah, I can do that right here. Hopefully everybody got, is there if I just stand here and do that?
Unless you'd like to
Would
say.
you like to?
No, I'm good here, standing's good.
You might
Thank
want to
you.
put stuff down. You can-
Nah, we'll do it on our feet here. That means I don't talk as long, so that's good for you. So hopefully everybody got a PDF of the audited financial statements earlier this week or sometime, or last week. And then tonight you got the printed copy. So again, I just usually do a whirlwind tour, and I'm here primarily for questions. So, I mean, I could start off, well, just catch me as I go through for questions. That might be the best way to go unless anybody has initial questions. So this is, in our business, this is called a required communications letter. And it's pretty much meaningless. It says a lot of things that pretty much we already know. It's really designed for if there are problems that, that need to be brought to your attention, but there weren't really any problems. So we'll dispense with that letter unless anybody has any questions on it. And then I'll do a whirlwind tour of the financial statements, if that's okay. So open up the printed financial statements. I'm going to page through this very quickly. I just want to mention on the letterhead page, that's really the only thing that's really ours. And that's our opinion on the financial statements, and it breaks down to basically saying it's a clean opinion and we think these financial statements are materially correct. So that's what you've got in the past, and that's what you hope to get. So again, I'm just going to page through, trying to point, there's like one significant change this year that I'll talk about, and maybe a couple other things along the way. So now I'm on page 4. It's the only place in the financial statement you're going to see comparative information. And there are a couple new things there. Not sure I really want to talk about them here because they relate to this year. Probably, if you look in the Down at the bottom, I have condensed statement of changes in net position. So basically, what we call an income statement, you know, revenues and expenditures. Under pension, you get about 3/4 of the way down under expenses. Pension, that's IMRF. 855,252 this year versus 334,000 last year. What the heck? So the 520,000 increase is due to the fact that we're now booking the accrued pension liability. So it's no longer basically the payments you made, now it's what you owe for what everybody's accruing as they're working and your true, probably more true pension liability. Sorry.
Is that a standard change with?
Yeah, that's GASB 68. That's a big thing that's been on the horizon for a while. I don't know why we didn't do this 30 years ago. Maybe our governments, like the state, wouldn't be in such bad a shape if these things had actually been booked and, you know, on the financial statements. So,
And I'm sorry, one more
yeah,
question.
please.
Does that bring us up to speed where the library should be, or is this just gonna be an ongoing?
oh yeah, so, no, it's not like a phase-in or anything. You're there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Although it will change every year.
Sure, but you're booking the liability every year, you're booking the true cost of pensions every year. So that actual pension liability can go up or down, actually.
So we'll be expecting to see that 855 type of number
Right.
going forward.
Yeah, please.
So governments, and particularly this government, there are things called defined benefit pension plans, which is what this is. That, like a 401k is a defined contribution, you know what you put in. Here, they're defining what they get out of it. So if there's a good year, if the stock market or whoever has a good year, we're gonna owe less. So since there have been years of bad year, even though it might have been 0 8 years ago, now it's a big number. So,
And actually, it's never been zero, IMRF. It's always been, but IMRF is different than like what all the stuff you hear about teachers' retirement, the unfunded state, the unfunded, you know, Chicago pension. Because IMRF, you're making payments every month, and actuaries are telling you what payments to make, and you're making all those payments. So, you know, you've never really been behind. There's always been a supplementary schedule that shows what percentage is funded or not. But the actuaries have always put you at a place where they think you're going to be okay. If I can just say it that way. I don't know. Is
so
that
this is
fair
based
enough?
on how many people they expect to live, how long, and what they expect to pay them out.
And it's changing assumptions. I mean, you'll see one thing in the notes that's really kind of dramatic. It's all about the assumptions. All about the assumptions. So one thing kind of interesting, if you look at total expenses at the bottom of page 4, and again, these are government-wide expenses. In other words, like the capital items you spend, which actually are very little this year, well, your books are always substantial. Those aren't expensed here because those are capitalized as an asset. But under this basis here, if you look at your total expenses of $6,581,000 this year versus $6,145,000 last year, looks like your expenses went up, which they did. But if you subtract out the increase in pensions of $520,000, all your total expenses actually went down by about $84,000. So, I mean, that's just good to know. It's like, hey, we didn't really spend, we spent less than we spent last year. The reason expenses look higher is because of booking this pension accrual. So, isn't accounting fun? I said I was going to go fast, and I will go a lot faster later on. So that prior period adjustment, the 1.3 million at the bottom, that's saying, you know what? We booked like 2 million in your, that's owed for pensions. But if you, as of 12/31/14, but if you look back to 12/31/13, you really owed like 1.3 million. So we booked that as of last year, then that way the expense just kind of the net difference in real rough terms. And then the only other thing to point out really is on top of that, the total revenues, they look very similar. And, you know, the only kind of funny things are the grants look less than last year, it's just because the per capita grant was doubled up the year before. And that under that fines, fees, and others, this year you got a one-time hit of a 35,000 limerick payout of like an old plan or something they're dissolving, I think, so. Okay, Paige, any questions on any of that? I mean, we'll talk about pensions again, but, there's mud. Top of page 5, that's a nice little summary of like, how did your funds do for the year? Who went up, who went down? So I like that. Okay, pages 6 and 7, those are your basic financial statements. We get on one page each, basically a summary of your funds and your government-wide statements for a balance sheet on 6, and then an income statement on 7. And the thing I'm going to point out on 6, I'm a little scared to point out, but it's a little confusing, but under deferred outflows of resources, post-measurement date pension payments. It's hard to say. That's new this year. And since all this pension accrual information and liability and everything is really as of 12/31/14, because that's when all their actuaries figured it out, that's the only way they could do it. So, and that's shown below, which I'll talk about in a minute. These are really an offset to that, because since 12/31/14, you've made $167,000 in payments against those pensions, so it's kind of like an offset to the liability that's below. Those pensions are snuck in there under liabilities due after 1 year. The $9.8 million, if you look in the far right-hand column, about halfway down, $9,834,402. About $2 million of pension liabilities is stuck in there, and there will be a note that will explain that more clearly. That deferred inflows of resources, that was new last year. That's when, again, the accounting profession figured out, you know what? Deferred property taxes are, aren't really a liability. They're just, they're just money that's owed you that's going to be paid in the future. So it's not really a liability. So that's why they broke it out to deferred inflows instead of a liability. And that's more fun than you can shake a stick at. Any questions on that? Or we can just keep moving. I know this is a little bit arcane. Page 7. I'm just going to try and talk about one number there. At the end of the year, in the lower right-hand corner, that net position is $7,895,341. If you looked at that same number on last year's financials, so the net position is kind of like the positive number. That's how much, if you added up like all your revenues and expenses since the library began, that would be the net positive number of what the library has. In business, it'd be retained earnings. It would be, so that's kind of like your accumulated net income since time immemorial. So that's a good number, that's 7.8 million. If you looked at that number last year, it was 9.6 million. So it's a, almost a 1.8 million drop, which is due mostly to, you dropped $2 million for the pension liability, except for you also paid off some bonds that went the other way. So that's more or less why. And I guess let's look at one other number here. On page 7, that total column, the third column in from the right, excess of deficiency of revenues over under expenditures, $270,000. So basically on a fund basis, you took in $270,000 more than you paid out. So that's just good to know. It's not, there's some libraries that are running a deficit, it's difficult. There's some that are running maybe $1 million plus every year, which is probably a little too much. So you're running positive but not going crazy. And let me say one other thing, in that if you go down that total column, that well, let's just look at the general fund. If you looked at the general fund at the end of the year, 3.2 million, 3,266,815, that last number in column 1. Again, that's your accumulated earnings over the years. So what I like to do is compare that to the total expenditures for the year. So basically you're saying that you have in reserves like 3/4 of 1 year's expenditures. Does that make sense? Or 2/3, somewhere around there. 3/4, 2/3. Does that make sense what I'm saying? So, I mean, some libraries have, like twice the number of years' expenses. You're pretty much sure you're gonna get tax protests and lawsuits, But you do want some cushion, because you don't wanna run it too short. So I promised you I'd go faster. Now we really go fast. Any questions on any of those? Those are your two main statements that tell your activity for the year and your financial position for the year. Page 8, boilerplate, same as last year. Page 9, boilerplate, same as last year. Page 10, virtually same as last year. Page 11, virtually same as last year.
What's the change?
Because I said virtually? Let's see.
The words are all the same, it's just like the little numbers that have.
Yeah, like page 11, there were no numbers, so it's probably, well, what's different actually on page 11, deferred inflows and outflows of resources, okay? So last year, we only had deferred inflows, but now we have deferred outflows too. And that's that $167,000 of IMRF payments. And yeah, I'm not trying to skip over anything, I'm happy to explain anything. I'm trying to be cognizant of your time. Property taxes, again, these are all pretty much the same deposits and investments. There's really no new news here. And again, hey, tonight isn't your only shot. Ask me a question. You can always get my number. You can always call me if you look over this. You have a question now or anytime during the year. I'm there every day, so happy to answer any questions. Page 13, we talk about capital asset additions and depreciation and the decreases are like the old assets we kind of wrote off the books that are no longer here, or that kind of thing. The computer and hardware and network, I think you guys bought like one server this year, plus your books, library books and materials, that's about the only assets. And then long-term debt at the bottom of the page that describes a long-term debt. And then, it's that neat little thing, net pension obligation report as of June 30, 2015. That's new. Top of the next page, that gives you the detail on your debt or liabilities. So this is important. So you all know about the bonds, and you know that you paid off $425,000 in bonds this year. You'll pay off the remaining $440,000 of those bonds next year, but then you shift over to paying off the Series B bonds after that. So it looks, you're paying off about, if you look at the schedule below that, you show what you're paying off every year in terms of principal and interest payments. And then the new thing that was added is a net pension obligation on top of page 14, that $2 million I talked about. So like your actual pension obligation might be $11 million, but they have assets that are like $8 million or $10 or $9 million. So that's why it's called the net pension obligation. And for us to get these numbers, IMRF, had themselves audited, they put out actuarial reports, and it's just, it's been a lot of fun. Like, for example, note 7, you'll get an idea of how much fun we've had, because we used to have like a 1.5-page note, now I think we get a 4-page note, which at the bottom of page note 7, it's all about IMRF. I was going to point out a couple quick things in this note. Middle of page 15, it's kind of nice, they talk about, who's getting benefits, who's inactive, not yet getting benefits, and who are the active plan members. In that contribution, it talks about, the district's contribution rate this year in 2014, they 14.08%. So that's what the district is kicking in to IMRF for the employees, along with the employees kicking in their 4.5%. So that's good to know how much you're paying. And again, at the very bottom of the page, the net pension liability, as I've mentioned a couple times, these are all measured as of December 31/14, because IMRF had to do everybody on the same date in order to make it work. Page 16 is very interesting if you're an actuary.
Yes.
Yes, there you go. And page 17 is even more interesting, but there's one thing I want to, I'm going to say there's primarily one thing I want to point out on 17. At the bottom of page 17, one thing we're required to disclose, like, hey, you know, this old net pension liability is built on a lot of assumptions. You know, one of them is your investment rate of return or single discount rate. You know, I think it's primarily what you think you're going to earn on your investments. So right now, what's built into this is a 7.44 earnings rate. But if you look down to the bottom, how the liability changes just based on a 1% fluctuation in that average. So if you really only earn 6.44%, not 7.44%, your net pension liability basically increases by 50%, goes to 3.4 million. Or if you get 1% more, it drops by 1.2 million. So I guess the point I'm making is, you know, I wouldn't say this is fuzzy math, but it's a lot of math built on assumptions, and everything's driven by the assumptions. So it can all change. You have a comment, Andrea, on that?
I don't think anybody's been, except for Back to the Future Day, which is tomorrow.
Right.
No one's really been able to accurately predict the future, so.
Unless the Cubs win this year, and then give it to them, you know. Yeah, exactly. So it's built on that. But on the other hand, it's not meaningless because you have to have a plan, you have to have an idea so you can drive the car. You may not know where the destination is exactly, but you know, you got to start moving towards it. So I don't disagree with it. I think they're doing the right thing, which is pretty complex.
I have one question.
Yeah.
How realistic is that 7.5%?
You know, it seems high,
It's very realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys do it all day long, and I'm not sure it's purely I guess investment rate, it's a discount rate as bringing it back, so I guess it's an investment rate is really what they're talking about. I mean, you look at a lot of their assumptions in there, you know, they talk about, you know, raises and inflation and things like that, but these are people who study this, and they're looking at, you know, not last 5 years, but the last maybe 100 years, or last 50 years, or 30 years, so.
Large cap stocks have averaged 6.4% from 1929 through December 31st, 2014, and small cap stocks have been another 6% on top of that. So it's not all that unrealistic.
Do you sleep with this information?
Yeah.
This is what I do every day.
Do you do valuations and
Yeah.
things? Yeah, so you have, you're into the rates. And so I'm not sure, let's see what else. I'm gonna breeze through this some more. Page 18. So I think page 18 ends the note 7 on IMRF, and then we go back into other things we've talked about before. Note 10, we've had before. This talks about the difference between fund accounting and then government-wide accounting, which those financial statements actually present both bases. And then that note 14 explains where that prior period adjustment came from, that, you know, we had to put it back to the beginning of the year too, if we're going to adjust for the liability. And I'm trying to think if page 22 is actually the same information that's in the notes, but in future years it'll have multiple year information. So again, there we go. Sure. So I don't have any other comments. I mean, the last 25 and 26 explains the detail of the more of the smaller funds that aren't on the face of pages 6 and 7. So. Can I answer any question about anything? Mainly, I just want to get you an idea of what's out there, what's changed a little bit. You know, the audit went well. Doug and I work well together. He gives me all this stuff, but you know, he'll let you know that I don't take it easy on him. Actually, the smarter they are and the better they are, the more nervous I get. because, you know, that's when you really audit hard, because these guys could run circles around me, so, so, I mean, I guess if I'm sitting in your position, I don't really wanna hear that the accountant and the auditor are best buddies, you know, I wanna hear that the auditor's doing his job, and that's what I wanna assure you I am. I'm sure Doug would say the same thing. Go ahead.
How long you been doing this?
Doing auditing?
Yeah.
37 years.
Very good.
And my biggest surprise in auditing, bad stuff does happen. When you're sitting in school, it's like, it's ivory tower stuff, these internal controls and things like that. But, you know, we've had firsthand experience in our office of, you know, the bad stuff.
I'm sure you were involved. Some of the libraries you audit might have had investments, like College of DuPage and that, whatever that thing was. That's not happening here, but we did have a changeover in directors, as you know.
Yeah.
Did you notice any change or any discrepancies in our system of internal control? that you
No.
Documented?
No, I mean, Ryan has few responsibilities. One of them is to
With
review
regard
and...
to the financial statements?
Oh.
He has plenty of responsibility,
No,
right?
oh, yeah, right. Yeah, exactly, yeah, I don't want to diminish that. But as far as internal control, and one of them is, you know, is to review and sign off on payroll. He's doing that after the fact. And, you know, and then the whole review of invoices and processes and, you know, things like that, those are pretty much intact. I mean, you have a pretty strong team here with Doug and Noreen, and you have pretty good segregation of duties. So, and even with your books being done off-site, I mean, Ryan doesn't even have access to the general ledger. Really, even Doug can't make a journal entry, you know, it all runs through your outside accountants. So that's pretty strong.
You made the recommendation in the past that we, after Doug presents us with the checks and we sign them, they be mailed by someone else, and we didn't make that change, and I'm under the impression that that's still going on. So is that still going on? And number two, are there any other recommendations you can make to tweak our system of internal control to make it even better?
Yeah, I think you guys have a pretty strong system here. You know, it's good whenever I get a chance to, who did I talk with this year? Did I talk with you, Joe? I'm always, when I'm talking to the board, like, okay, when those checks are presented, you actually look at the invoices, you know, you sign the check. Because, so, if, you know, that's a good control, as long as people are actually doing their job with, I'm not coming up with the right word, but, you know, they're thinking about their job and they're actually doing it with integrity, I think your system's strong, you know. Yeah. I don't really have any recommendations.
That's fine.
Yeah. Any questions? Let you guys go.
Thank
Okay.
you. Enjoy the
Thanks
game.
very much. Yeah, same thing. Yeah, you guys too. Have a short meeting.
I move that we resume the agenda with item 5, the consent agenda.
Well, don't we want to have a motion on this first, since we just finished?
I move to accept the audited financial statements as presented by our public accountants. I'll second it.
Maybe we're going to roll call since it's one motion. If you would.
Katsinas?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Parker-Peasy?
Aye.
Caldwell?
Aye.
Sheldon?
Aye.
Deal?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye. All right, now we can go back to the consent, right? We don't need a motion for that. Oh, there's a part B?
I just
I
only
think we
move
need
to
to
make
do
it
that
for
at the
part
same
A.
time. Yeah, he should only made the motion for the first part. Okay, back to the consent. Anyone have anything they want to take off?
Yes. I'd like to remove both items 115 and 528.
Oh, okay. I'm just going to do that too. Anything else? Okay, do we have a motion on this one?
I move we accept the consent agenda as presented with the exception of I, bullet points number 1 and number 2.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain. Okay. Okay, Bob.
Put them up.
You are.
Page 86 is 115, Bob.
Serious illness in the workplace. Who defines what's serious and what isn't? Because the plan doesn't, I mean, this policy doesn't. And then again, we have the reasonable accommodations. Who's defining reasonable? What's reasonable, what isn't?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, it's gonna, well, I think it's gonna define in the policy. I mean, a lot of times with some of these serious illnesses, it's communicated to the Administrative Associate for Human Resources, Joe Cirillo. I mean, there are illnesses that I'm not even aware of in certain cases, because we, you know, a lot of times she'll protect the privacy of those individuals. So I think it's, you know, it fits the criteria of that first sentence, employee with serious illness, cancer, heart disease, or AIDS. But it doesn't, it's not totally exclusive of those.
When we discussed this at committee of the whole, Bob, it was discussed that, you know, it would be an illness that would make it, some aspects of a person's work would be difficult and there would be accommodations. So, you know, it's not just an ordinary, the cold, or even if someone breaks a leg and they need, you know, to not stand as much, or, you know, I think that would be a similar situation.
And in terms of reasonable accommodations, Bob, did you ask about that? That's pretty clearly defined in the law. That sense has an accordance with all legal requirements. There are a lot of cases where we would make reasonable accommodations, and that could be anything from ergonomics at the desk. It could be you know, other things as well. We have an employee that is deaf, and we make accommodations for her as well. So I mean, that's something that we do already, and it's pretty clearly defined. And I think isn't there may be another policy that even covers that? I'm trying to remember when we talk about, George, didn't you suggest that we us?
Yeah, the disability policy.
Right, so that's also,
There's a disability
Covered.
policy that hasn't come to us yet.
Right.
And could I add to this that I, when I edited this policy, I changed the format of the dates to spell them out, and that is not the format of this manual, so I'm gonna ask that we change them back so that we don't have to change them all.
Well, that's, I talked to Joe about this briefly before. I would prefer that the month be written out on these. Joe said she was opting for going with numbers for the month, because that's the way the majority of the policies are, so it would be less changing of things, you know, less work to fix everything. I'm thinking that having the month written out is worth the one-time work, you know, as we go through all of these. So that's my take on this.
Anyone have strong feelings?
I think this is just a minutia, and that really you can do whatever you want, and I really wouldn't care.
I agree.
So, I wouldn't even notice, but I wouldn't care.
Why do you like the names written out for the month instead of the numbers?
It removes any possible ambiguity or people mistaking the date just because they're doing things in a hurry. The other thing I could point out is that the way that we do dates, month, day, year, is not the way that most of the world does them.
True, but.
If you saw 7/8 on a British document,
But
it
on a
would
British
be
document,
August
it's gonna be
7th.
written 8th February 2013.
Well, But at least that is still not ambiguous or
Okay, who
open to
cares?
misinterpretation.
Can I make a motion to leave it as is, because it's less work?
Uh,
New ones as is?
To leave
To
it
change
numbers
it back
or-
to how the, most of the manual is.
Honestly, I think that makes the most sense. It doesn't make a difference.
Is any second
Yes,
to my
right.
motion?
I'll
Agreeing
second.
with Nancy, I received birthday cards on the 11th of July, which isn't my birthday, because everything was put in numbers. Okay? Yeah, and the military always did, like 06 and OV, 50.
Okay. Who wants to leave them the way they are in the manual?
Rather than have the motion that way, how about who wants them to leave them as all numbers? That
Let's
is
leave them as all
unambiguous.
Okay, we're done with that. Okay, so,
Thank you.
do we have a motion on this policy then? I'll make a motion that we accept this policy.
I'll
as
second
amended.
that.
Okay, we can have a roll call on this. I mean, we can have a, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention, okay. Okay, you took off also 528, Bob.
Yeah. The suggestion for improvements, it states in here, a safer place to work, which I don't see happening very often, but besides that, it says, making a recommendation concerning coworkers and/or management are not appropriate suggestions. Well, if you got a screw up as an employee and 10 people come up with the same thing, it's blow that off, because
That's not the purpose of the suggestion, is all it's saying, but if you have something of that nature, you have to take a different course of action.
Yeah.
It's not a suggestion form.
They would take that to human resources.
Yeah, that's a different issue.
A private meeting in human resources rather than
An
putting in a
anonymous note
suggestion.
left in a box.
okay.
Okay, do we have a motion on this one?
I move to accept policy 528, suggestions for improvement as presented.
Second that.
With the dates.
With the dates,
It's modified.
modified the numbers. Second?
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? You're abstaining?
Yep.
I'm abstaining. Okay. My president's report is on page 88. I have to say that I noticed after it was in there, what I do is I call up last month's and make some changes, and I see that I left we had planned a September board agenda, which obviously it should say October, so just pressing on with that. Other reports, please. Anybody?
I would like to apologize for missing the workshop Saturday. I did attend the Friends special story hour, and I attended Thursday at the movies.
What was the story on? Was it fun?
As it was, that this was, Stephen Hawking was this month.
Anyone else?
I attended the fundraising thing, which I found to be very beneficial, and I think it would be great. But I also think it will take a lot of hard work on a lot of people's parts, but it's exciting. And number two, I would like to remind board members, even though it's going to happen at the end of the meeting, that on November 2nd at 6 o'clock, our committee will be seeing the presentation of the Warren Township High School art students on the ones we like best, and everybody's invited to attend.
George?
I would just like to say that I also attended the fundraising seminar on Saturday. It was very interesting and educational, and my youngest did enjoy the Friends special story time. So it was fun.
Okay, anyone else?
I attended both community cafes and the fundraising workshop, and the takeaway from the community cafes was how positive people were and what a diverse group came to that with their ideas. And hopefully we can gather some of those names and put them to good use.
I attended one of the community cafes also.
Okay, anyone else?
You know, I'd like to compliment Ryan on how well run both sessions were. It was really nice.
I agree. I thought you were really in your element. People were very responsive and you're very accessible to them. And there was a lot of good
There was
energy.
just-
Yeah, it was
you
really
knew where you
great.
were going with each little step.
Oh, thank you for that, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, correspondence. Do you want to talk about, say anything else about the legal memo or just let it stand?
I think
on
it's
its own?
self-explanatory, unless anyone has any questions.
Okay.
Just to, yeah, as always, just, I think we were all up on
Okay.
FOIA, so just think before we
Yeah,
ask.
yeah. Okay, public comment? 3 minutes, you want to speak?
Me?
Yeah.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
My name is Gustavo Borelli.
I'm sorry, Ricardo, your name again, sir?
Gustavo.
Gustavo, thank you.
Thank you.
I live in Delhi for quite a few years. You probably find my name familiar and sent you an email before.
Yes.
I have been using the interlibrary loans from the library. Let me say that it works very well. However, when there is an interlibrary loan for certain material where the library doesn't have the equipment, in particular, most of those loans are for in-library use only. So basically I see only two options, either to buy the equipment, which might be expensive, or to make arrangements with other libraries that already have that equipment. I know that, as far as I know, libraries require that interlibrary loans are made for in the home library, but the question is what happens when the home library doesn't have the equipment, which is the case here, right? I found that Libertyville, Mandalay, and Round Lake, they do have equipment. And I was wondering if there's any way to get into an agreement or an arrangement with this neighbor library to let them make interlibrary loans for people that doesn't live in that area. Otherwise, the other option is to buy the equipment, but that's going to be expensive.
What equipment are you talking?
Microfilm readers.
We don't have those anymore?
Most of the historical information comes in microfilms nowadays. The Library of Congress, they have a lot, but they only loan these for in-library use only. Universities, they have a lot of microfilm material.
Excuse me, is there a difference between microfiche and microfilm?
Yes.
Yeah, they
microfilm is
usually do
reel to
one,
reel.
but they usually do both.
Okay.
Microfiche
Microfiche
is
is
hunks
flat.
about, flat hunks about like that. You know,
The microfilm readers are, they're old, yes.
We used to have this equipment. didn't we?
Yeah,
But if there's.
I don't remember getting rid of it. I mean, I haven't
Well,
noticed it for a
there is no
while.
microfilm reader in the Warren Library. There is one microfilm reader in the Grace Lake, College of
Lake
Grace
County.
Lake County. But it's an old equipment, right? It works. I can tell you it works.
They're being digitized slowly, but there are always issues of digitization.
Yeah, and at one time, most genealogical stuff that you wanted, was.
I
Can I ask
spent
that,
many,
Brian?
many years looking through microfilm myself.
As I did too.
I appreciate you.
As Ryan, could you look into if we have one in the back somewhere, or, what it would
Yeah.
cost and maybe
Sure.
make a proposal for next year's budget? Our budget for this coming
We're-
year
we're
through
so-
June
yeah.
16th
But
is set.
wait a second, I'm not asking you guys to buy an equipment.
This isn't just you, like if there are other people who
that's fine, but if you make an agreement with.
We're looking for creative
Liberty-
solutions as well.
Mm-hmm.
Are they reasonable machines?
So, Libertyville, they have 2 of those equipment,
Yeah.
Mandalay also. Maybe you can get into an agreement with them, so they can do a loan on our behalf, on patrons that lives here in Gurnee, because you don't have.
It might be
insurance.
easier to get a machine than to change the customs of interlibrary loan across the entire state though. Just, so we can look at all the options.
Some, people who don't want them anymore, I think there could be some. on the
Yeah,
market
there might be
somewhere,
some
yeah.
on
We wouldn't buy a new
Craigslist or
one,
something.
but we could
Right.
get. like,
But we
know
thank you
doesn't
for
want
bringing it to our
Yeah.
attention,
Okay,
Did you sign the sign-in sheet with
I did.
information on how to reach
so we
you?
can,
Yeah.
Thank you very much for letting us
Gustavo,
know.
here's my card. That's your card.
okay, thank you very much.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
A lot of newspapers, old newspapers.
Very well.
Okay, report, committee of the whole report? So, I guess I might as well say it now, right?
Yep.
Okay, so Ryan and I, in our infinite wisdom, forgot to put a vote on committee of the whole on this agenda. I apologize.
And I apologize.
And not only that, but if you look at the end, when we put, how we would do the next committee meetings, we said, oh, we couldn't possibly put any dates or arrive at any conclusions, we'll just put everything at TBD, and even then, we didn't notice that it wasn't in here. So we will have to, he consulted Roger, and Roger said, we could sort of have a, placeholder discussion, but we really couldn't take any action tonight, so we will have to do it next time. So, I'm sorry.
And I'm sorry, but
Yeah. Okay, so,
Thank you.
So question then, does that mean that there is no committee of the whole and there are no other committees meeting in November?
well, we'll have to decide, what do you want to do about that? We can decide about that, Roger said, correct?
Yeah, right.
So what do we want to do?
So what you're saying is we can either discuss this.
Well, we can, obviously, the committee report is here, you can ask any questions, but we can't take any actions and vote on if we're going to stay with that method or if we're going to return to the other method.
We
can't
can
do it tonight.
decide how we want to meet in the next month.
Correct.
Which is
We can
normally
decide.
part of our agenda.
Yes.
yeah, it's procedural,
Yeah.
so it's fine.
So we could do it now, or we could do it at the TBD end, whichever you prefer.
So here's my question. We're talking committees right now, committee of the whole. What we've been primarily discussing in committee of the whole the last month has been personnel policies. I don't see why we couldn't hold a personnel meeting to continue to work on that.
We could, but we'd also have to hold a finance meeting to do
I
the
don't think
budget.
that,
We'd have to have
finance
review.
committee
Yeah,
would
we
really,
discuss all the
We
committees
discuss
of committee
everything.
of the whole.
And if we meet personnel separately, then it would have to go to policy, which is one nice thing about doing it all at once, is that it avoids having those go through 2 committees.
I wouldn't think that finance committee would need to meet in November. There's nothing big going on, right?
No,
I mean, the levy, but that's not finance committee, that's you.
And the only thing policy committee has on its plate is whatever personnel committee sends it.
Well, there's
Oh,
going to
and, yeah.
be, yeah, it'll
Couple
have
other
be
things.
2040, and there'll be 3023, and one more.
well, a couple of other issues to discuss, strategic plan update, and then, I believe outreach is also on the, would have been on the agenda in the whole, in terms of Milltown.
We've got our committee, but
Right.
that's not part of committee of the whole.
I don't think there's nothing really, there's really nothing urgent on bullets around the calendar at the moment.
Okay, so,
Can we just
We're just-
piggyback policy and personnel?
sure.
Those of us who
you
don't
wanna
need to attend?
do that. Is ARC going to last longer than an hour?
I don't know how many students are presenting.
I think we need to give our attention as possible.
I don't want to cut any students short.
Which means that policy and personnel just need to meet some other night.
That's
Yeah.
a good thing, yes. There's no reason why we can't have policy first, or personnel first, then policy the same night.
Yeah, one,
Schedule them.
Right.
7 and
So,
8, yeah.
okay, all right, so what about the next night then, the 3rd? Does that work?
Tuesday the 3rd,
Yes.
it works for me.
Is that okay?
That's good with me.
Personnel, okay. So we'll just have personnel and policy that night. Okay. All right, next.
I'm assuming it's 7 and 8 respectively.
Yeah.
Can you, what if you did 7 and 6:30? Isn't it okay if the meeting starts late, but not early?
You mean 7 and 7:30?
Yeah, so, well, yeah.
7 and
45,
7:30.
because if you end one early, then you can't start the next one. You're gonna sit around for 15
How many
minutes.
policies are we talking about this month with personnel?
I don't know if I have that with
Bigger than a breadbasket?
me. I think it's 3.
I had 3.
I don't
I mean,
think it's
you
at all.
sent me 3.
Yeah, I've seen 3, but I understood there were.
I think
more
there's
than-
one more, so it's 4.
I think we can do 4 policies in half an hour.
Okay, so 7 and 7:30. Okay. Personnel and policy, November 3rd, 7 and 7:30. Okay, next. Is that executive director's report next?
Correct.
Questions for Ryan?
Just thinking, buildings and grounds, we were discussing the building updates, so we just do that in the general meeting.
Is that what you said you prefer? That's what he said? Mhm.
Because I'm gonna be gone that entire week.
Okay.
You're gonna be gone?
Yeah, I remember, it was mentioned last, I'm gone the entire week.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I do remember that, yeah. Mhm.
So it works out fine.
Yeah,
That was
Perfect.
good. Okay.
What we're still discussing is one suggestion to throw out there. And this is more something to think about rather than something to act on. We're thinking of this as either or. I don't see any reason why we can't have both. So for example, do quarterly meetings of the individual committees where they can do more in-depth work, and then committee as a whole the remaining months.
I have to say, this is speaking for myself selfishly. I bow to any person, Sue Nemi, who has gone to 6 meetings a month. And that is one of the things I would like not to do. I'll just put it out there. So that is an option, and if we decide to do that, I will come to every one. It would not be my preference. Okay, so we will talk about that next time.
But I still think maybe not as elaborate as George's suggestion. Like we're doing next month, we can still jump off a committee of the whole and decide if we have some really
Well,
in-depth stuff we have to get
Committee
on.
of the whole would include whatever we needed to include.
Mhm.
So in my mind, you can call this whatever you want it, but this is the sort of.
That's our committee of the whole for
This
this
is
month.
committee of the whole, and
Yeah.
this is all we have that we need to do next time.
Mhm.
So, I don't know,
Yeah.
you
The
know,
principal difference is that there are no citizen members in committee of the whole.
right.
I see that as a weakness. It allows us to bring in outside expertise that we can really use.
Well, we can always bring in outside, well, let's not have the discussion now. Let's wait until November, okay? Because it's really not on the agenda. Exec Director's report, questions for Ryan, please.
I just have one quick comment if there's any questions. We're still working on statistics because I know I hate the format. We're still tweaking it. It's gonna look beautiful when it's done.
You're talking about,
Statistics. The statistics section of the executive director's report.
oh,
Starts on
okay.
page 100. It's gonna be organized in needs, and I just don't like the format. I told you a few months ago that we would change it, and I'm still working on it. I mean,
We had talked
the
about
team of
getting
people are working on
like,
it.
either an ad hoc committee or something to try and pare down what you have to report on and what we really need, And, because it's grown over the years, I've heard. I never saw the condensed version. So if that's something you're interested in, maybe we can put that on an agenda or something for a later date, or?
I appreciate that. Let's see, when we have the statistics updated and that's implemented, like, let's see how everyone feels and we'll see if we need to take that step. Because, yeah, trying to get this thing manageable.
Yeah, it's a lot that goes in there,
Yeah.
and a lot of it that we probably don't need in a high-level report.
And that was the idea behind that first page, the executive summary. If you're only gonna read one page, read the first page, it gives you the highlights, and then if you wanna get deeper, you can move on, so.
Okay, anything else on this? Okay, staff room, you're on.
So, following up, in terms of the staff room, I shared that proposal with you at the beginning of the whole meeting. I also shared it with the Ballots just to get feedback, and I think Bill Ballock and I were on the same page. Just wanted to get more details, because if you'll recall, that proposal was pretty, it was somewhat brief compared to the Corte proposal. So I asked Tiffany about, the permitting process, and any permits would be needed, and how she would be involved in the bidding process, and I was satisfied with her answer, so I still think that we should work with Tiffany and Ash for product design, architecture and design.
So are we ready to sign a contract with them?
Well, I presented it at the last meeting, and I think that the next step was to decide at this meeting, and I just wanted to, I don't think, did anyone else have any follow-up questions? Because I didn't have any from the last meeting. So I had some of my own follow-up questions, and I was satisfied with the answers, and Bill Ballock had a few questions. I want to involve them in the process, since they're such a good player in this process, so.
The only question that I'll ask, has anyone approached the village of Gurnee yet about any potential permitting issues that we may have? Gurnee tends to be a little,
Heavy.
yeah, that's a good word for it, heavy in its permitting process, and I hate to see us get slowed down at the last minute because they balked at something we thought was normal.
Yeah, admittedly, no. That being said, the project really is a fairly straightforward one in terms of, we're not necessarily doing structural changes, putting in any doors, anything like that.
We're not moving plumbing, are we?
Yeah, not moving plumbing. It's pretty much a cosmetic change more than anything else.
But what about the timing of it too? I mean, you hear about, my husband does these projects in the city, and the permits take forever to become effective,
Mhm.
and that can really hold up.
Gurnee doesn't take forever, they're
Okay.
relatively quick, but they will come back with a page worth of recommended changes that you have to take. And they can sometimes be.
After an inspection, you mean?
They have,
Or to the project?
To the
they have
project.
no problem being
Yeah,
ahead.
I might defer to Mr. Getty in the audience and see if he has any insight into this.
Yeah, we didn't really have, with the last project in 2011, we didn't really have too many issues with them. We have a good relationship with them, actually, in the other projects that we've done. So, as Ryan said, it's more of a cosmetic, so I wouldn't anticipate any really lengthy delays that would hold it up. Not that I can see. That's my experience anyways.
Do we know what they require permits on?
Everything.
Do we know what they require permits on?
Do I have a list of everything the village requires permits on? I don't, no.
But it's on the village website, you can look at
Yeah.
it very easily.
But that's one of the reasons we are hiring an expert here to handle these issues, and we have in-house expertise with Kevin, so.
It says.
I think if we delay voting another month to get that information, then we're delaying the project another month, is the way I see it,
So
so.
we have action, so how is it that you want this motion worded?
Yeah, this is one of those things that, I think we talked about this with the tween space. I want the board to be on the same page as myself and the staff. I think, something as simple as, make a motion to retain Tiffany Nash of Architecture Plus Design for the staff funds would be sufficient.
I make a motion to retain Tiffany Nash for the project design and administration for the staff lounge.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. Tween.
Tween Space, so we have had, I don't know, several meetings now with Tiffany Nash, and who's done a number of different spaces, as we mentioned before. She did the, in terms of closed projects, the new youth space in Wakanda, which is pretty amazing. And, you know, she presented us with some thoughts and some different ways we could go. Then she presented us with a budget. It was a little more than we had to spend, and we said, well, let's try to cut some of this stuff out. So she came back with some other thoughts and is tweaking this, and we should be prepared. She should be prepared to present something to the board. I'm optimistic in November. But she's been great to work with. She's listening to our needs. We're taking into account the information we got from the tweens, from the staff that work with the tweens all the time, and that project is moving along. So. And some of these decisions will be made easier because we're having to make some cuts to the project because of the budget. It's $72,000.
So no water slides.
No water slides. No. But that being said, you know, we're going to get a lot of value for that money. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Some of the, like, I wouldn't call them renderings. They're just kind of like these very sketches, yeah. So I'm excited to see what she's going to come back with to us, and you'll have a chance to give your feedback, and it should be pretty amazing. It's going to be exciting, really exciting project. So we're very excited about it, right, Noreen? I mean, we're stoked. I mean, it's,
Okay, any other questions on this one? Okay.
and so we're right on time too. I mean, I'm, you know, the early, you know, spring of 2016, it's gonna happen. So next, shelving.
Yeah.
So our collection and development committee met and talked about this issue, and not just specifically to sci-fi. It's also other adult fiction series in order. Why aren't they in order? Why aren't they at least numbered on the spine label? And some of the conversation that they had was that this might be difficult to do because we'd have to decide what books to include. Many books feature a character throughout several titles, but they're not really known as series, such as the Jack Reacher, Walt Longmire books. Series are more prevalent in the sci-fi area, but many of these authors decide to write prequels after they've already written several books in the series. Would we then have to renumber? Also, when a title goes missing, many times these books are out of print. Not being able to purchase specific titles obviously leads to gaps in the series. It was discussed that it might be helpful to simply indicate on a spine label the name of the series, so the patron can easily locate these books, especially for authors that write several series, such as James Patterson. So the next step in the process is the Technical Services Department is going to go on a field trip to the libraries to see how they handle the situation. So, it's the discussion has started, and I guess we're in the fact-finding phase. How do other libraries do it, so we can see what their models are and figure out a way to address the situation. So that's the update. So that's what's happening next. Tech Services will go and see what other libraries do. So, any comments, feedback? George, you brought this issue up initially, so.
Take a look at how Barnes and Noble does it too while you're at it, basically. That's what people are used to seeing when they are at other libraries.
BISAC. It's an interesting discussion. I mean, there are libraries that have, you know, they do different things. Some libraries do BISAC. There's a library in Connecticut. They're in Connecticut. They're famous for coming up with their own classification system. It has its pros and cons. I mean, there are a lot of different ways you can do it, and all of these systems have their pros and cons.
Let me say, even here, we do have some precedent for this. In the children's department, I think, what is it, 39 Clues?
Mm-hmm.
That series has half a dozen different authors, and all of the books are shelved together. So we can make decisions to do something like this.
Oh, sure,
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I know, if, we all have our phones, we can look it up while we're sitting there to see what order they're supposed to be in, it just would be nicer.
But not everybody.
Exactly.
No, I think it's important to look at these issues because it's all about the user experience, right? If someone comes in and they can't find a book in the series, they're gonna be, yeah, they can use their phones and they can buy it off of Amazon, right? Forget it, I'm just gonna pay the whatever it is and buy
Which
it.
is what I usually end up doing.
Sometimes I don't even want, I see one's missing and I go to the reference desk. I wanna know if it's missing before I even start, because maybe I'll just pick something else.
Yeah. So no, it's definitely something to pay close attention to, because if it's, you know, that's the one advantage we have, well, not one advantage, we have a lot of advantages, but one huge advantage we have is that experience when people come to the library, and we don't wanna lose that because we're not organizing our books.
There was a book I
Right.
damaged, I can't remember what it was, but recently, in the last year, I dropped it, found a small corner was taken out of the chunk, and they charged me for the book, which I was happy to pay for the book, and then they gave me the book. I said, no, 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 keep the book, there's a waiting list for the book, please keep this book. And they said, no, they'll just have to wait longer. And I was, to me, that made absolutely no sense at all. It was a small damage, I paid for it willingly, please keep it in circulation. And they said, so what if we're taking out book 3 in the series, and now it's gone? Moving on.
moving on. Fundraising workshop.
So, I have a report, I didn't type this is a brief report by Diana Vickery. And, you know, she sent this immediately after the fundraising workshop, and it was so well done, I asked Diana if I could share it with the board, and she agreed, so. It just is a very nice summary of the workshop, I thought.
Should I pass around the thing, the handouts? as
Oh,
well?
sure, yeah.
Over there.
So I don't know if we should take a few minutes to read through this, or if we should discuss it. Maybe just take a minute to read it, it makes the most sense. Yeah, no, that's what
We're all
happens.
to number 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Please.
I was the one who said, let's not have the board in charge of fundraising, not because it was extra work for the board, it's just because we went through such a dysfunction with the board that I would never want to put that type of thing under a dysfunction that could happen that way ever again. Just because it would ruin it forever. You know, if we got this thing going and it was successful, and we had a board that became like we wanted, that would we had before. It was not because of the work. It was
Another
because-
thing he said that's not included here is that you don't have to pick a method and stay with it. In other words, you could start with number 2 and then later decide that you wanted to morph it into a foundation or vice versa. So there, I thought there was quite a bit of latitude, you know. What I heard him say was that the most important thing for the group, it could almost have any name, but that it had to be a 501c3. Do you agree with that? And since the Friends already are, you know, there was some thought that that might be a way to begin, but not necessarily that it would have to stay that way forever. That, you know.
Two things. One, that it be a 501c3, and B, that its governing board not be one that's elected by
Yes.
all of the members, but that is more selective in nature.
Mhm. The Friends, I think one of their biggest concerns was that they want to continue doing what they already do really well, which is the book sale, and the people who work on that really love that and want to continue doing that. And so, you know, that was something and everyone agrees that's a wonderful thing. We don't want that to go away. I thought it was really he had a lot of content, I thought, to the workshop. It was really, did you agree? I thought
Oh, yeah, I
he did
thought
a
it
great
was
job,
really
yeah.
One of the things I think Christy Truey had suggested was, at least in the beginning, maybe a group called Super Friends. That would be like the beginning of a foundation. There are a lot of options.
I think fundamentally, book sales and bake sales is what we'll classify what the Friends currently do. These are things that bring us much needed revenue, but it's never gonna be big in terms of its scope. It's always gonna be something
Mhm.
relatively small potatoes by its nature. What we need is not a bake sale, we need a friendly neighborhood fairy godmother to come in and bestow some money on us every so often.
Mhm. He also said that the timeline for achieving this test would be lengthy. I mean, I thought he said we would be doing well if we had 2 people identified for this fundraising board by June.
And that was for a year, and then not another year
Yes,
you add more.
yes,
So it was-
and that-
Is he still at our disposal? I
Sure,
mean,
yeah.
He will still.
Oh, yeah, he's very, open to having conversations with us, sure.
They're a nonprofit group, and one of their missions is to help libraries like us do this. So one thing that I thought of afterwards is, when you walk through this library, it's not clearly evident how much has been donated to the library. We've got the giving tree in the front, but, you know, it should be very prominent when things have been donated. You know, all the artwork, all the programs, and yes, it's said at the beginning of every program, but when you walk in, it should be hit. You should be hit with donated, 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 and that way people understand that a lot of the things that come to the library are indeed donated, and we're still looking for more money. So maybe we can put that in next year's budget, prominent signage for all of the things that have been donated.
I'm thinking we already do have some signage for
It's not obvious.
a lot, like the study rooms and some areas in the collection.
But if you walk in, it's not advertising that things are donated. It's like, and donated.
In some instances, it has to do with sometimes the donors, they only want certain recognition. Believe it or not, when I remember looking for Carol's Storytime Room, those plaques, they're really expensive. You'd be shocked how expensive they are. So it certainly is not, I love your idea of we need to get that message out there. Just have to figure out the best way to do it.
There's
because-
gotta be a way to do it that, you know, whether we're putting big gold stars by things that were donated, or there's gotta be some way to promote how many things and programs better than we're doing it now.
Yeah.
Because
But we have
pe-
to have that driven by the donors, not by us.
I disagree.
When you look at something like let's say the Abbott Fund. If we ever were to go to Abbott and ask for money and have them actually give us some, they have very specific guidelines about what signage is put in, how their name is used. You'll see that in all of the larger corporations. If they give you money, they want their name displayed, but they don't want it displayed how you want it, they want it displayed per their brand guidelines. So we have to make
That's
sure
not what
everything
I'm
we do.
talking about.
You're talking right now about what we've already brought in, which is great to recognize those people that have helped us in the past. But we also need to work on how to get more people to join us in the future. And not just individuals, but some of those larger purses that are out there.
So to wrap this up, let me just say that the task that we were charged with at the end was that this presenter, Stu was his name, right?
Stu Wilson.
He called these people persons of affluence and influence. And if we know people of affluence and influence, and as Diana to be library users, they don't necessarily need to live in this library. Forward those names to Ryan.
Yeah, so, yeah, people of influence, wealth, and expertise, so.
Yes.
It could also include someone, because we need someone with a finance background. It could be someone that is a lawyer essential to this board. So, yeah, so that's important that it's a team effort. I met already with Diana and Lauren today to start to talk about this process. And not only would I like your, those ask, but we might also ask you to approach that individual to see if they would want to be a part of this ad hoc committee, because it's more powerful if you have a connection person. Needless to say.
There was a person at one of the community cafes fundraising. I don't know what her experience. But we were there together.
Yeah,
Did you know who that is?
We kept great notes on
Okay, all right.
this conference.
Enough said on that. Anything else? Okay. So 13B. Resolution, anyone want to make a motion?
Any questions, because this was a late addition to the.
You can have the motion and then bring out questions.
I move that we adopt resolution 2015-2016-2 to determine the estimate of funds needed for fiscal year 2015-2016.
I'll second.
Discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those, should we have a roll call?
I think this
Yeah, yeah, roll call.
Katsinas,
Aye.
Barkatisi,
Aye.
Caldwell, Leamy,
Aye.
Deal,
Abstain.
Sheldon,
aye.
Beckman.
Aye.
Carries.
Okay, items for November. Anything in addition to what is already here? Nancy, do you want your, what did you suggest at the committee of the whole?
Don't we want committee of the whole on?
Yeah, but she had an issue that she wanted on the next committee of the whole if we had one, which it was homebound.
Pardon?
Homebound.
Oh, thank you.
Anything else?
Do we need either of the building projects in there?
Yes. Nancy, could you write a little narrative, just a short paragraph or two for the packet? About the homebound thing that you, so we have some
Although
facts.
Ryan has already, Ryan provided me with some
Okay.
information.
All right, we'll talk about that
Yeah.
offline, just so we have that.
Yeah.
You know, speaking of the past too, can we keep the fundraising an agenda item every month? Just That's an easy one to drop. Yeah.
Good idea.
Anything else?
And maybe some months there's nothing.
Right.
But that's okay, but just keep it.
Okay, want to make a motion, anyone want to make a motion for the exec session, please?
I move that we go into executive session for the purpose of litigation. ILCS 120/2.C11. And do we want Ryan to be present?
Yes.
Or Ryan present?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Now, that needs to be a roll call vote, legally.
Oh, okay, thank you. Katsinas.
Aye.
Parker Peasy.
Aye.
Caldwell. Neely.
Aye.
Deal. Sheldon.
Aye.
Craigwood. Aye. Thank you.